But it's really the U.S. federal elections where this gets really exciting. And the Senate, for the last number of years, has really just killed any cannabis legislation. If we can get Mitch McConnell out of that seat, the cannabis space is going to start to price in a lower cost of capital, safe banking. The market's going to start to price in that new flow of capital, that new operating environment for cannabis. It'll start with the hedge funds, then the family offices, and then finally when the institutions, when the legislation passes, we think they're going to bum rush the space. So a big election.
Saturday morning. Good morning, Todd. Thanks for waking up early. We're going to talk weed. I got color of money and weed on. You say it. What does green mean to you when you see?
Green is the color of genius, Howard. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, I'm just going to soak that in for a second. What's up? Where are you today?
I'm in Port Washington, New York. Month number 7 of this interesting year we're having. But this too shall pass, as a wise man once said. But we're Port Washington, New York, with my wife, my 3 kids, our 2 dogs, and we're just we're healthy, so everything's good.
Yeah, I look at that.
There you go.
Bring back any. You see this word? What does it mean to you?
It makes me want to duck. I feel like there's a water bottle about to fly in my head.
They used to fly, these cups?
The water bottle. I have seen water bottles fly. Yes, this was a thing.
But not a coffee cup.
Not a coffee cup. No.
What about a
cup to fly back?
what about a soup can? Have you seen a soup can come at you?
Not in this context.
So you are on Investing for Profit and Joy, and today's subject, we're I don't know, less than 30 days away from the election. I've had you on my podcast. Wanted people to see your pretty face. We've known each other. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it could be like I'm talking to Phil Perlman here. You know a little more than Phil. So let's talk blue wave, because It is a possibility. You know, I had you on my podcast. I felt like a 50-50 thing. Now it feels like an 80-20 thing to me. It feels like it just feels like an out of control possibility that there could be a run on the blue. Now, I say that because I'm watching like solar stocks go through the roof and energy stocks implode. I see that and this is just the market. And I'm starting to see, with a few weeks to go, weed stocks finally put in some kind of a bottom. So we've had all kinds of fake or runs. It's been a horrific year for marijuana. So I wanted you, as someone who runs a marijuana fund, in a shorter form than my podcast, let's just walk through what could happen and what's an interesting case for marijuana in the next 12 months. Remind people a little bit the fund and what you do. Sure.
Okay. So let's just stay on point here with cannabis and how it's set up for the election. And the context is about a 2.5-year bear market. So January of 2018 through March of 2020, global cannabis was down 92%, which is a pretty deep cut. So that's the global market. I think what we're starting to see as 2.0 rolls around. 1.0 was Canadian cultivation, and we saw how that played out. Way too much capacity, way too much enthusiasm, and that didn't work out well for many people up north. So as we entered 2020, our base case was really looking at the fundamentals on the U.S. side of the equation. The leading MSOs, the multi-state operators in the U.S. Are doing quite well. Business is booming, fundamentals is booming, total addressable market is expanding, margins are healthy, and they're doing this despite onerous regulatory constructs that have been created by the federal illegality of cannabis. They're doing this despite the fact that they cannot trade on U.S. exchanges. And not only that, but a lot of the custodians that would clear and custody these stocks have walked away. So they're literally choking the industry from the thing that it needs most. It's the oxygen for survival here, and that's capital.
Are they doing this because on purpose, or they don't?
Yeah. No, this has been, there's been 90-year propaganda campaign after the first prohibition ended, and they needed to put all those G-men to work. They used cannabis they weaponized it as an immigration tool at the Texas-El Paso border to stop Mexican immigration back in the day. This was back in, I think, the 20s and 30s. So this has always been sort of politicized, and it's been on the wrong side of history. Don't get me down that rabbit hole. But my point is that the prohibition is very much the exception rather than the rule. And as we are entering into this election season, we have the chance to start to unwind that. And that's where it gets really interesting from an asymmetric opportunity standpoint, because our base case is the fundamentals for select U.S. operators. And figure there's a dirty dozen of them, and you draw that line right down the middle between the haves and the have-nots, and the haves being the ones who have some capital, have profits, are generating free cash flow, and have already invested in the scale necessary for the back half of this year and to 2021 for these emerging states. So the election is important on two fronts. Number one, at the state level, you have 5 states. The most important in our view is New Jersey. Widely expected to pass. And if New Jersey passes, the conventional wisdom from people who I consider to be smart, and something that we think happens from following along, is that it's going to open the gateway to the Eastern Bloc. So New Jersey is going to open New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and so forth. We already saw Vermont and Maine this past week finally get off the schneid and move toward adult use. So the Eastern Seaboard is falling, and that's really bullish from the sector fundamental standpoint, full stop, right? Now, that's the state side. The other one's Arizona, not a small market. That's expected to pass. You have South Dakota, go for Mount Rushmore, stay for the weed, I guess. I don't know. You have Montana and you have Missouri, each having either recreational or medical. But it's really the U.S. federal elections where this gets really exciting and a bit binary, because the Senate for the last number of years has really just killed any cannabis legislation.
Yeah.
And if we can get a blue Senate, which is how it's looking right now, the predicted betting markets 23 days out from the election have a 70-cent bid on a blue Senate, right? Now, whether it's a 51 a majority or a 55 supermajority will have implications. But if we can get Mitch McConnell out of that seat, the cannabis space is going to start to price in a lower cost of capital, safe banking, the States or More Act, which would allow cannabis to remain legal in states that have authorized it, because this is a states' right issue. And if we get a blue sweep, then certainly, you could argue that there would be steroids added to that mix, and you could, of course, get U.S. listings on the exchanges, and you could potentially get, some of these bigger players stepping in. But we know the guerrillas, we know the barbarians are circling. We saw Putnam, we saw Wasatch, and a few others slip through the gates last quarter. If there is a banking reform legislation that comes in either through the coronavirus bill before the election, which I don't know if we get, but if we get a bill, I think we see safe banking in there, or if you see it after the election, the market's going to start to price in that new flow of capital, that new operating environment for cannabis. It'll start with the hedge funds, then the family offices, and then finally when the institutions, when the legislation passes, we think they're going to bum rush the space. So big election.
So it doesn't seem possible that McConnell loses, though.
Well, no, but if the Senate loses the majority, he's not the Senate majority leader anymore. I'm going to have a party if that happens, because we're not.
I may come.
This episode is presented by Masterworks. My wife Ellen and I are longtime contemporary art fans, having collected contemporary art for 20 years now. So I was thrilled to have Scott Lynn, the founder of Masterworks, on the podcast to explain the fascinating art world and how exactly this industry operates. The art market allows us to think about diversification and fractional ownership in such a unique way. This is an amazing industry that remains uncorrelated to other investing classes. Every investor will enjoy listening to this episode, I promise. Head over to howardlindzon.com/masterworks to give it a listen. The link is also in the description of the video.
If it's a red wave, what happens?
Status quo is not the death knell. It probably flattens the curve. And it probably, takes some of the fast money out of the equation in the short term. But like I said, we're leaning against the fundamentals in the big guys, and there's 5 or 6 companies that no matter what are going to do well, right? And we've talked about them on your show before. But this is really a regulatory arbitrage, and the amount of institutional capital that's waiting to come into the space dwarfs the number of companies in the space that are actually investable right now. So we think that we're going to see that price in over the course of the next 3 weeks until the election, then quite possibly after into the election. But what we've talked about, we're advising an ETF called MSOS. It's a New York Stock Exchange listed MSO. It's the only New York Stock Exchange listed vehicle that has exposure to U.S. cannabis, and that's through total return swaps that they do. So I don't think many people know about this yet. We got involved because, in the land of, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? Like, I'm not saying that this is the ultimate solution to access to the space, but in the absence of regulations that are going to allow people to invest in individual names that they think are going to win, this is a heck of a way to play U.S. cannabis. And I don't think many people know about it yet. And I certainly don't think that the folks over at Robinhood know about it yet, because if they did, this is what you want. You see these ads.
Well, it is listed there, so I'll send this over again to them. But
no, but my point is, everybody's talking about MJ as the ETF to play for cannabis. MJ is Canadian. MJ is Canopy, it's Aurora, it's Kronos, it's Afria, which have their own fundamentals and their own outlook, which is fine, but it's not U.S. cannabis. U.S. cannabis are Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Columbia Care, Cresco, TerraSend, Forefront. These are the names that are U.S. cannabis players, but most people don't know the difference.
And I started myself last week with MSOS just to have, full disclosure, I'm an investor in your fund. So it's weird that you can do swaps in an ETF, but you have to be accredited to give someone like you money. It's just so funny. Like,
well, the
average person that buys a swap buys the MSOS is never going to understand what's in MSOS.
No, but therein lies the landscape that we live in. People, a lot of people will complain about how these names are listed up on the Canadian Stock Exchange and how the cap tables are all convoluted as a function of that, and the insider stock that keeps coming out. But you got to remember that this is an industry right now, and you've got multi-billion-dollar franchises that are now being traded on the pink sheets because you can't trade them on the New York Stock Exchange. But this is an industry that got here despite onerous tax laws and choking the capital off and every possible regulatory snafu that they could throw at this industry, they've thrown. Could you just imagine the type of business these companies are going to do when they have an even playing field, when they don't have to spend all their money to pay an onerous tax bill in 280E, when they don't have to put their money in a bag, as opposed to a bank. I mean, we're still at the starting gate here of this industry. And this is going to be, in my opinion, I've said this for years, and I've been early, I've been wrong, however you want to say it, but I think it's early. This is going to be a generational opportunity. This is going to be an asset class, and this is going to be an economic engine of growth unlike anything this country has seen in a really long time.
When you say economic engine of growth, I had this discussion with friends recently. We were talking about booze, weed, gateway drug, not gateway drug. Why is it an economic, forgetting hemp, or maybe you have to include hemp, why is it an economic engine? Now, I understand we criminalized it, and then we punish the people and they pay their fines, and that pays the police, let's say. I mean, it just seems so obvious that we could tax it and fund a whole lot more police.
Hold on. They put 500,000 people in jail last year for possession. This is not about getting a fine. This is about people of color, mostly 80%.
No, I meant,
jail for something
on their way to jail, they take their money to pay the police. This is ridiculous. Versus, we could tax it, we could regulate it. We could
that's what's happening, Howard.
And that money could go to fund the police, and everybody wins.
This is all about moving this industry into a taxable realm. There's a $300 billion worth of cannabis every year that's consumed. So the way we're looking at it is saying, okay, there's 300 billion. People are like, okay, that's a pretty good
in
market.
The U.S. illegally.
It's globally. Globally. All right. But what I'm saying is if you have $300 billion and you look at cannabis as an ingredient, right? Not as the end product, but as the ingredient that goes into a number of use cases and end products, not to smoke, but to eat, drink, as lotions, as bath bombs, as pet supplements. And you talked about hempcrete, plastic composites. It's green. You build homes with it. I mean, we are just at the precipice of this turn. And yes, economic engine, follow the money. That's really the only reason this is going to pass. You know, we didn't even talk about how coronavirus is the single greatest catalyst for cannabis in history, where you mix in the social justice reform now with Black Lives Matter, and you got yourself a perfect storm into an election here. So this is going to happen. It's just you have more and more stakeholders wanting to sit at the table saying, where's my piece of the pie? Where's my piece of the pie? Politicians, stakeholders, investors, industry types. There's a lot of money involved here, so it's going to take some time.
Of the three, so they approve it. What is the biggest industry for the first few years? Is it just pure usage smoking, or is it the ingredient part? Or is it?
I don't think we have to differentiate in 2.0. It's going to be a one-stop shop. And I think that the Biden plan as it stands now is particularly well suited to the MSO model. So, you know, we're heavy on the top line MSOs right now. We think those are the plays into the election. And if we get a blue sweep, you probably see it continue into earnings. Would not be surprised to see positive pre-announcements out of U.S. operators, or at least the leaders. Business is booming. I think, you know, our back of the envelope calculations for Illinois is like 40 to 45% quarter over quarter growth. I mean, you're not going to find that many places else. So, you know, we think that there's a lot of things about to change here, but you're paying 50 times, you know, multiples in tech right now, and you're paying, you know, I think Truliev's trading at 8 times 2021 EBITDA. So you tell me, at 8 times 2021 EBITDA, would you rather own that growth company or a growth company that's trading at 50 times? I mean, I think it's just a matter of time for people pick up on the scent.
And the last quick question. So is that why they called this ETF MSOS, because it's multi-state operators, or no?
Yes.
I'm not that dumb. I mean, I was scared to ask the question.
No, it's early, but that was good.
I'd never be scared to ask a question, because now I will never forget that ticker. But and what could companies like E-Trade or Robinhood do? What is their responsibility here? I
mean, listen, you know, I've told you that, you know, if you know, there are stakeholders in the cannabis industry that just want to play an even playing field, and among that is getting their equity, their stocks on other platforms, and that's what's been going on for the last 2 years. At the end of about a year ago, into last year, Pershing pulled the plug on custodying all cannabis-related securities. We've heard more and more stories. We've heard more and more stories about.
Hello, Todd. Could you do a podcast today?
Sorry, nobody seems to care.
That's hilarious. No, that's. So go ahead. So no one seems to.
So people can't find the right cut. People are buying Canopy for the U.S. elections. I mean, and it's
made the mistake. I bought a little.
I understand, Canopy. But it's not anything else. But there's not enough
proxy. There's not enough proxy. There's not enough correct proxies for what.
Right. Well, that's what I've been doing on Twitter for the last couple of years, and that's what I try to. You know, why I got involved with MSOs, because people need to understand. I mean, I watch CNBC. They talk about the pot trade, and they list 5 Canadian tickers. That does more harm than good. You know, people need to understand this is not about getting high, this is about getting well, and that this is really something that's quite good for you. You talked about gateway drug. I'm seeing more evidence that cannabis is a gateway drug away from dangerous drugs, not toward dangerous drugs. There's a lot of offsides here perceptionally. There's been a lot of propaganda, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this thing unwind as people realize that this is actually therapeutic.
All right, that was a good take. I appreciate your time today. Where do people find you on the Twitter and on the?
I mean, I'm
Todd Harrison
_ Phil Perlman. You know, many years ago, begged me to get Todd Harrison for Twitter. I'm like, Twitter is never going to be anything, and so I had to get
all the smartest people. And I was early, so that means I'm not smart. But all the smartest people I had to beg and drag on. I still think Twitter today. Switching gears for a sec, because you love stocks. I don't know if you trade anything anymore, but just wind down with just our passion for the game. Is it a game? Is it a career? Is it everything? What is it about it that just can't get enough of?
I think it's a mode of expression. I think it feeds people's desire to be heard and be centric. You know, listen, I'm prolific on Twitter. I do it as a way to help to educate and to help to amplify the CB1 brand as we're trying to build a business here. So I just, and I find it to be very informative. I've been a watcher of social mood for many years. I think, as you know, probably 15 years, I've been writing about the devolution of social mood and this migration from, societal acrimony to social unrest to geopolitical conflict, all coming out of the great recession, I guess as they call it, 2008, as sort of the unintended consequences of policy tool. And I think Twitter, in a way, has really adopted that. It's a mirror of society, and I think that's why you're seeing so many interesting uses of the block button. People take people are bifurcated in their views. It's unfortunate, but it's also something I think that's endemic and more of a symptom of society right now.
It's so interesting. I feel it's the best feature. I hate to be the guy who's a problem, because I feel like I think it's the best feature. Obviously, the best feature gets used wrong, right? Like, the block puts me into an echo chamber only because this is my tool. I'm not paying for it. I have to see the nonsense. I use the block button. And what's so interesting about, I always thought Twitter was the markets, right? I said Twitter is the mood, right? And so I heard your take there on Twitter, but the same thing about the markets. You love the markets for the same reason. The markets are way more expressive than Twitter because you can see everything and you don't have to hear the comments. You see it expressed in price, and it's kind of, it takes out all the noise and just leaves you with the price. And then you have to guess if everybody yelling behind the price is right or wrong. Is that what you love about the markets too? I mean, obviously you could focus on just a weed business and not stare at the screens, and not have the job of getting paid for your returns. So what is it about the markets that keeps you at it, even though your passion is marijuana or hemp or?
Well, listen, I've been 30 years now trading these markets, staring at the price action in the tape. And I said earlier this year, if you're trying to look at this market through the lens of free market capitalism and through the metrics of fundamentals, technical, structural, and psychology, you're probably going to be hitting your head against the wall. But if you're looking at this market through the lens of this is a matter of national security, and we've seen a world war probably going on for the last number of years without a single bullet being fired, but expressed in currencies, expressed in class wars, expressed in digital wars, and there's been a lot of even what happened with the last election. So I think we have been at war for a number of years. I think it's been expressed through things like the stock market and our digital protections. And I'm reminded that the end goal of war is not death, but economic destruction. So. And division within your borders. So, as you look around this country, you got a big election coming up in 23 days. And, hopefully it's the beginning of starting to trend towards, a more unified approach. But
we don't know. And then lastly, since we're now back on the markets, I see charts about the money printing. I don't understand. Listen, obviously, governments print money. What? Is it just do the economists have it wrong, or history will prove that this debasing of what is the trigger point where they just print money? Like, it just feels like everybody.
Well, there's only so many release valves for this mechanism, right? You have a currency release valve, you have a rate release valve. It's never wise to mess with Mother Nature, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, every time we've gone through this with the government, you say, well, this will unwind ultimately. I think we've dug too deep right now. I don't know how, you sort of back out of this. So I think there has to be some sort of currency debasement or some sort of release valve, whether that's rates or something else. But, right now, into the election, 23 days away, I think right now probably the market's looking through and saying, okay, well, if we do get a blue sweep, we're going to get a $2.5 trillion stimulus, and and if we don't, we'll get another stimulus. But this is not necessarily driven by the fundamentals of the companies as much as the marionettes in Washington.
Yeah, a little interesting, and I wonder, because I've been techified, let's say, right, numb numb, and I know it's coming. Listen, I'm not very long stocks. I keep telling people it's like I'm not going to get wealthy anymore from stocks, because to go to
Tech stocks.
tech stocks.
Right. 'Cause I think you're going to have generational opportunities in cannabis. Generational opportunities.
And that's what worries me, is like, I'm an old man. I've got one trick, QQQ over SPY, and in that world, it's going to end. Like, just nothing goes on forever. And so I know that in my head. I'm moving myself out of the markets into real estate and private, and I'm riding what I can, and knowing with one foot out the door. Maybe if I was 30, I'd be thinking different, because I know I don't have another trick, right? I know that if you tell me I got to buy 8 times EBITDA in an industry that doesn't interest me, I'm all happy for those people, and maybe I'll own a few things. But because I'm not passionate about these companies, so luckily my passion coincides with 50 times sales. Like, I know it's a joke, and luckily, I love Peloton, I love Lulu, it's ridiculous, but I live with these products. I don't live with anything else. So I don't know if the market will mean as much to me when these stocks that I love, or these companies that I love, or this industry I love goes day after day, limit down, or day after day, rebalancing, right? Like, I can't imagine the pain of someone just being in the oil industry going, fuck, everything's working, but the Exxon keeps going down and Chevron keeps going down because of the inputs, right? And I long gave up on those things because I never understood them anyways. So I don't know when that happens, and it'll be great for you. And maybe it'll be, I just have to give money. And this is kind of where I'm thinking about my world, is instead of investing in companies, I'll just start investing in people. And maybe, as I get older, that's where it goes. I'll just have to get my thrills by investing in people who know those subjects better, and kind of just get behind them. But it scares me only because I'm having fun, because I think I understand.
You always leave a party when you're having a good time.
I've been leaving, and I swear to God.
You're like, why? I'm like, 'cause that's when you leave.
I've been leaving too fast, and then I come back in to grab something on the, and then I go, and this party is going to end. And
I remember the story of Sir Isaac Newton with the tulip bubbles.
Yeah. So I look forward to my party continuing for a little while, but I always love talking to people that are passionate and know that the fundamentals are coming for something else. And the question is, when does it just, it doesn't just end, it's just like suddenly, and then it starts. I think in marijuana.
But here, this is Howard, this is the added twist here. This isn't just people turning around and waking up to the notion that cannabis is an asset class. This is everybody in the world basically knows what this is, but 99% of the investors can't access these stocks right now because of the way that they're listed and the restrictions putting on by the gatekeepers. Mm-hmm. So it's not just buying into the fundamentals. You're buying into a regulatory arbitrage that when these restrictions are listed, a whole universe of institutions are going to come for these stocks. And that's what you're front running. You're front running institutions here because they're definitely going to buy 8 times 2020 EBITDA for this type of growth. So
and it's the opposite in tech. The institutions are going to leave a really big footprint on top of the retail investors.
And listen, it's been rocky as hell the last couple of years, kind of waiting for this to come together. But the payoff in terms of the total addressable market, and think about what state isn't going to need the money, aren't going to need the jobs. They're saying the 250 cannabis jobs, none of which are in the BLS right now, is going to go to 1 million cannabis jobs. I mean, we need jobs. Our states need income. People need their medicine. And oh, by the way, this is therapeutic. This is not something that's going to fry your brain. And that's the offsides, the perceptional offsides. As these clinical trials come through and people realize this is not about getting high, it's about getting well, that knock-on value for the late mover crowd and the consumer side on 2.0 is really going to push the needle forward. So there's a lot of things that we're looking forward to. It doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. And there's the potential that on the other side, even if we get a blue sweep, you're going to have an alphabet city of regulatory agencies trying to take their bite out of this thing before anything moves forward. So
yeah, never goes as fast as you want. So it's kind of,
right.
But for
But
people out there, yeah,
Yep.
and I mean, what I love about Twitter, stock twits, the markets is, and now it's social media. Look at this Zoom call. I'm sitting with you at 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning, like lunatics talking about this stuff for people, because we want to share. I mean, that's what you've been doing since this, I don't know, the 90s. I've been doing it since the 2000s. But anyways, this is Todd Harrison. What's great about this, you can just follow along with Todd in a very lightweight way on Twitter. And if you're polite, you can ask some questions. And Todd gives it to you straight. He's feeling the pain of the wins and the losses. And we all don't know everything, but you'll get some straight poop or straight cannabis from the man. All right. Have a great Saturday, buddy.
I don't know how I top that. Thank you, Howard. As always, you're a gentleman, sir.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Hang on 1 sec.